mushy, sugary, fizzy, pop. What do you hanker for? From handmade to high-tech, these treats feed our cravings. So grab a handful, take a bottle, drink it down, and pass some of that good stuff around. Now, more snack food tech on Modern Marvels. Each year, Americans consume a whopping 15 billion gallons of carbonated soft drinks. That's more than 50 gallons per person per year. While production processes can vary greatly with each soda manufacturer, all carbonated soft drinks begin life as a syrup. Today, we're making Dr. Pepper.
We have 4 components that you will put into a syrup. Typically, we'll have water, we'll have a sweetening system, we've got a coloring system, and then a flavoring system. Now, this is treated water. And we want to make sure that the water is pure and clean so that all of our flavors and sweetness levels come through the way they're designed to by the scientists. We will then go ahead and add our sweetener system. Now, what Sharon's working with here is a high fructose corn syrup.
Sugar was the predominant sweetener used for almost a century. High fructose corn syrup took its place in most mass-produced soft drinks in the mid-1970s. HFCS is less expensive, which means more profits for manufacturers. And while consumers in blind taste tests can't distinguish soft drinks made with HFCS from those made with sugar, there are some who are happy to give their opinion.
Oh, gee. I mean, corn syrup makes sodas taste dull, and sugar gives sodas a real snap. Sugar versus corn syrup is always better.
The third ingredient is what gives Dr. Pepper its aesthetic identity, a coloring agent.
Now that we've got the color of the syrup just where we want it to be, we go ahead and add our special ingredients, and that's the flavoring. Now, I'd like to be able to tell you what's in there, but we can't because that's the top secret piece of our beverage.
The recipe from the small batch is scaled up in a large tank. And then a sample is brought back into the lab for final testing.
The tests we're performing here today are a measurement of tartness and a measurement of Brix, which is a measurement of sweetness. And we do these tests to ensure that the batch has been properly made.
This sweet success is ready for the big time.
Historically, when syrups were made, they were probably made in small batches of, say, maybe 1 gallon or 2 gallons. Today, our mixing operations blend ingredients through continuous blenders at a rate of 350 gallons a minute.
The syrup is the defining part of any soft drink. It's what gives the beverage its unique flavor.
When producing syrups, there are optimum conditions. For example, in our mixing process, we look for a low humidity type environment and a production mixed tank temperature of about 65 degrees.
New syrups are put to the test at a pilot plant, where the processes are scaled down and slowed down. After quality control is performed on the syrup, it's ready to enter the filling line. But first, gotta clean the bottles.
Today we're using our pre-labeled bottles and we're going to send them through our inverted rinser. The purpose of the rinser is to rinse out any kind of contaminants or dust or anything that might be in the package.
The clean bottles are ready to be filled with the soft drink du jour. While syrup may be the most important part, the largest component in any soda is water. But not just any old tap water will do. The filtered and treated water is stored in tanks, ready for its holy matrimony with the syrup.
This is a large batch of syrup that we made earlier. From here, the syrup will travel through our line into our blender. From here, the syrup will be combined with our water from our RO water tanks, travels down through these systems here into our final mixing bowl. Here it is still uncarbonated. All we've done now is thrown the beverage in a 5-to-1 ratio. From here, the beverage will travel out into our carbonation pump and up and over to our carbo cooler.
This is where the industrial alchemy happens. The syrup and water blend enters the top of the carbo cooler and passes through a stainless steel screen pan. The droplets disperse down the carbon dioxide-filled tank over a series of refrigerated plates. As the liquid descends, it absorbs the CO2 gas. The combined cooled and carbonated beverage travels through an insulated line into the filler.
On top of the filler is a large tank. Beverage comes in through the bottom of the filler, fills up the tank. The tank then distributes product to each one of our filling valves located on the outside of the filler. The bottles will enter in. They will be grabbed by the neck supports on the filling valve. The neck support will bring the bottle up to the valve. Then from there, the bottle will exit out the other side full of product.
Full of effervescence, the bottles travel to the end of the line, where the flavor and bubbles are locked in.
To cap off everything we've talked about today, we're going to have to go to the capper. Once our finished beverage is in the bottle, it travels here to the capper. The cap is applied to the proper torque, and from there, it's shipped out to all the consumers all over the world.
Things may move slowly at a pilot plant, but the average full-scale bottling plant can output 600 to 1,000 20-ounce bottles per minute. Not too shabby considering the industry's humble beginnings. In the 1760s, in an attempt to emulate reputedly therapeutic effervescent natural springs, chemist Joseph Priestley discovered a way to impregnate water with fixed air, using a simple pump mechanism. But this bubbly drink just wasn't cutting it in the flavor department. Chemists in the 1800s began experimenting with sweetened syrup extracts that added savor to the sparkle. In 1884, a young Waco, Texas pharmacist, Charles Alderton of Morrison's Old Corner Drugstore, invented one of the earliest sodas. Supposedly, the store's owner named the drink after his friend, Dr. Charles Pepper. And the most well-known soft drink in the world was born shortly thereafter.
Coca-Cola was invented by a pharmacist named John Pemberton on May the 8th, 1886. Legend has it that Pemberton mixed up the first batch of Coca-Cola in his backyard in a copper pot using a boat oar. He then took this beverage to a drugstore in downtown Atlanta, where it was served to the first patron and was found to be delicious and refreshing.
In some cases, the beverages were initially intended as treatments for whatever ailed 19th century Americans. The first bottled soft drink was Moxie, which was something of an acquired taste.
They came in a 6.5-ounce bottle, and if you could drink 2 of them, you had a lot of Moxie, and that's where the term Moxie came from in the dictionary.
Pharmacists searched for good-tasting vehicles to dispense their bad-tasting remedies. Many of our favorite pops started out having a little extra pop. Coca-Cola contained caffeine and an extract of coca leaves.
And it made everybody feel good. Pepsi-Cola with their base, which was a pepsin base, aids digestion. And of course, Moxie was made with Jensen violet root, and that just made things even better. And all of these sodas had different drugs in them at one time or another. Until they had to pull them out.
These one-time medicinal tonics evolved into sweet drinks that people lined up for at the soda fountain.
This is a typical 1930 soda fountain. And when you wanted a Coca-Cola in 1930, you would come to the soda fountain. Well, we started with 1 ounce of Coca-Cola syrup, added 5 ounces of carbonated water, jerking the handle back and forth to create a stream that mixed the Coca-Cola for me. And that's where I got my name as a soda jerk, from jerking the handle back and forth. And it cost you 5 cents was all it cost.
Today, the major soft drink manufacturers engage in a multi-billion-dollar business that spends lots of that cash on research and new product development. Some of the new products emerging even boast some nutritional value.
So we spend an awful lot of time researching consumer trends, researching consumer habits. So in the last few years, you've seen a number of new products.
But the large brands haven't completely monopolized the soda market. If you're interested in real variety, Galco's in Highland Park, California, is a veritable mecca for aficionados of carbonated soft drinks. But you won't find too many of the big boys here. Shelf space commonly reserved for big-name sodas in cans or plastic bottles is stocked with glass bottles of unusual and nostalgic items. Anyone who enters Galco's gets the benefit of John Neese's personal expertise.
Well, this is Jamaica's finest, and it's made with real ginger root oil, and it's absolutely hot. It burns all the way down and all the way back. And this is Red Ribbon Cherry Supreme. It's made with real cherries. It's probably the cherriest cherry soda you'll ever taste. When I tell people, I said, look, make it easy, buy the case now, because you're going to be back. And they just smile and they walk out, and the next week they're back buying a case. The mint julep, you can't go without the mint julep. When people taste this, everybody gets excited. There's two types of people, those that like mint and those that don't like mint. And if you like mint, you're going to love it. And then the Manhattan Specials. They've been in Brooklyn, New York since 1895, and their primary soda is the coffee. They actually roast the beans, grind them, brew it, and bottle it. This is really good.
Despite John's seemingly sugar-induced exuberance for the fizzy stuff, he allows himself just one bottle a day.
I like that.
Maybe two. But what if you crave a sweet that's a bit more substantial? Donuts. If all the Coca-Cola ever produced was put in 8-ounce bottles laid end-to-end, it would reach to the moon and back almost 1,300 times. More snack food tech will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to more snack food tech on Modern Marvels.
The glazed ones are good. They're so tasty. I like them. I wonder.
They call it Donut Theater.
Are you hungry? I'm hungry.
Kids of all ages stand behind the viewing glass and marvel at the steel assembly line that turns dough, oil, and sugar into a little ring of heaven. The donut. A completely mechanized process ensures that each sweet circle is perfect and uniform. As it makes its way into the box and ultimately into your mouth.
The extruder behind me forms the dough into the right size and shape. And how it works is it uses air pressure. And the more air pressure we add to it, just like a balloon will make a bigger donut, the less air pressure, the smaller the donut. The computer controls our air pressure so that it makes the donuts the right size and shape every time. That computer takes away all of the human variables in it, making it the right size and shape. However, I cannot show you that piece of equipment.
It's out of the extruder and into the proofer.
Inside of the proof box is 120 degrees with 32% humidity. What we do is we boil water, and then the hot, steamy air is distributed throughout the whole box for a half hour. A good example of what this would be is a donut sauna. The donuts then become the right size and shape so that they'll be perfect for the next step, which is the frying of the donuts.
The pleasantly plump loops float along the river of vegetable oil, heated to 360 degrees, browning ever so lightly on the submerged side. A gentle flip, and the other side gets bathed and browned. The little drifters begin to bob in anticipation. as they approach the cascade of milky white glaze. A slow pass under the sweet curtain, and the rings emerge cloaked in a flawless, shining, sugary layer. Only the blemish-free are selected to go into the familiar white and green box.
That would probably taste real good.
So what exactly is Krispy Kreme's secret for making the perfect light and airy donut craved by so many? The secret lies at the mix plant.
We keep the secret recipe locked up in a vault. There's only 4 people that know the secret recipe. Come on, follow me. Here it is. That's about as close as we're going to get, though.
The Krispy Kreme mix plant in Winston-Salem, North Carolina is where the mystery ingredients are carefully combined and then distributed to stores around the world.
This facility that we're in today is 200,000 square feet. We actually have 2 mix facilities. Between both those plants, we can manufacture up to 1,200 bags of mix per hour. If we ran our plant capacity, we can do 30 million donuts a day, which if you do it on an annual basis, we could produce 7.5 billion donuts a year.
And it all starts on the top floor, where the dry ingredients are fed from above pneumatically through air lines into hoppers, leading down.
All the ingredients are coming down to this stage. What you have behind us is just your common household blender. It is now basically being mixed and blended a little more, and it's going to fall down below into the 50-pound bags that we'll see in the next stage. What we have here is the last step in the process. This is the step where the mix is put in 50-pound bags. These bags are distributed to our stores. Exactly 88 dozen of donuts can be made with 1 bag of mix.
But before becoming part of any mix, all ingredients are brought to the lab to be closely scrutinized.
Samples are taken, they're brought here into this analytical lab, and we test for all of the quality specifications that we're looking for in the perfect ingredient to go into our product.
These quality control measures ensure that a Krispy Kreme is the same whether you get one in Sydney or Syracuse, London or Lubbock. Donuts have been enjoyed worldwide for hundreds of years. Native Americans had their cornmeal and sap version, and Dutch settlers had their oliekoek, or oily cake. But if the whole makes the donut, credit Sea Captain Hanson Gregory.
They were making these fry cakes on a ship, and the captain was steering the ship like this, and there was a squall, and it was very rough, so he needed some place to put the fry cakes, so he took it and he put it on the wheel like that, and that's how the donut was invented. It's a great urban legend.
Donuts gained popularity during World War I, when the Salvation Army ladies in Europe fried them up in garbage pails for the soldiers. When Johnny came marching home again, he brought with him a refined taste for the sweet treat. In 1933, Vernon Rudolph, founder of Krispy Kreme, began to make a whole lot of dough with his secret recipe for yeast-raised donuts.
Back in the 30s, the mix was formed much differently. The name Krispy Kreme comes from the way the original recipe came together. You have the cream base and then the crispy frying Krispy Kreme.
In 1937, Rudolph moved to Winston-Salem and began making his donuts in a rented building for delivery to local stores. But people kept stopping by in the morning, asking for them hot and fresh. Ever the entrepreneur, Rudolph cut a hole in the wall of the building, giving birth to the first Krispy Kreme retail outlet specializing in hot donuts.
Vernon Rudolph was always looking for ways to improve the technology. It was in the 60s when Krispy Kreme really went off in a different direction and looked to deliver the same shape every time. And that's when the extruder was invented. And so instead of cutting donuts out of dough, we were extruding donuts. And he had the idea of adding air pressure to that so that he could stamp out donuts the same size and have a continuous process. His vision was really to have, from the time that the mix went into the dry mix and the wet mix went into the mixer, that there would be an automated process from there all the way to the finished product.
Donut tech has come a long way. But some donut makers still do it the old-fashioned way.
Come on, baby.
By hand. Or at least mostly by hand.
The way we make donuts is add flour and water and yeast together, mix it up in the mixer, and then it's put on the baker's table, and it's cut up into little sections, and then it's rolled out and cut by hand in different shapes, whether you want a glazed donut or a jelly donut or a bar. From there, it's put on frying screens and then put into the proof box. And then we put it in the fryer, and we cook it till it's done, and then put it on the glazing table.
At Randy's, they hand make 32 varieties of donuts, each more sinful than the last.
This is a jelly pump with lemon inside. Then we just pump the jelly inside the donuts. The lemon filling is made of pectin and sugar and lemon flavoring. These are our Long Johns. We're going to ice them with chocolate and maple icing. This is basically a double boiler that heats the water up, and then it heats the icing. Voila!
Ever wonder what happens to the holes?
The donut holes go out in the urethra somewhere. No, the donut holes are just put back into the dough so we can make more donuts.
And more donuts is just what Randy's needs. Customers line up in the wee hours to get some of their finest. The resilient donut has seen us through the good times and the bad. But can it survive a more weight-conscious society? An assault on all things carb-laden has been perpetrated by Man the Hunter and his real true love. Meat. In about 22 seconds, Krispy Kreme can produce enough donuts to make a stack the height of the Empire State Building. More snack food tech will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to more snack food tech on Modern Marvels. Family-owned Rudolph Foods of Lima, Ohio, has been making fried pork rinds for more than 50 years.
Annually, Rudolph Foods Company converts about 120 million pounds of raw pork skin into about 40 million pounds of finished pork rinds, or sales of approximately 90 million each year.
That's a whole lot of pigskin. Yep, that's what they're really made of.
The pork rind really has a rich history. It goes back to when hogs were butchered on the farm. They found use of basically all the products on the hog. In the form we eat them here in the United States today, they were brought to us from Spain.
This is a raw pork back skin. We receive these skins in every day in 40,000 pound shipment. The material comes in, is inspected, and goes into the freezer because we run everything in order of age. So we're running the older material first.
They take Porky's hide and cut it into 1-inch squares to ensure a uniform product. The skin squares will now undergo a 2-step process on their way to becoming pellets.
This is our first step cooking process, drying, where we're pulling moisture and oil out of the raw material. During this process, we also add cure, which is a secret ingredient which we're not going to be able to tell you. This is our second step cooking process, rendering. where we are pulling additional moisture from the material. In this vessel, we have oil and an agitator that gently agitates the product to ensure even cook.
Pellets come out of the renderer at 240 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way too hot to handle. So they must be cooled to under 100 degrees. At a more manageable temperature, the pellets can be checked for quality using the Tegra optical sorter, a high-speed product handling, detection, and ejection system.
We put in the perfect pork rind color, and then as the pellets fly through, if they are any other shade than what we've put in, air knives are going to kick this pellet out into an overflow table, and it's then thrown away. These air knives will kick out any defects from dark pellets, light pellets, the occasional pig bone that goes through.
Next, the pellets are conveyed to the fryer, where they're fried in lard at 400 degrees for 1 minute, expanding to 5 or 6 times their size.
As soon as the product is fried, it hits the cooling conveyor, and then it's conveyed to the seasoner, where it is seasoned at about 130 degrees. While the product is still warm, the seasoning will stick to the product. Now the product is ready to be weighed, packaged, and sealed by this vertical form-filled machine, and ready to enjoy.
Meat eaters like Tony have been enjoying animal parts since day one. But before refrigeration and canning, people used drying methods to ensure good meat didn't go bad.
The Europeans, and primarily the Spanish, were making a dried meat product that they called charquet, and the English translation was jerky. But when the Europeans came to the New World, they found that the Native Americans here were already making their own jerky from just about any kind of meat that they went out and hunted, but they couldn't consume immediately.
The meat was boned, defatted, and cut into strips about a 1/4 inch thick.
They would sometimes season it, sometimes not, either lay it out on a rock in the sun, maybe hang it from something, but really the sun was a key component for drying the meat.
Today, producers of large quantities of jerky turn to automation, but the basic premise remains the same.
The process of making beef jerky starts with USDA inspected beef roasts like this, very similar to a roast you might get at your grocery store. The difference is we have to use beef that's very, very lean. Any bit of fat in a piece of beef will make bad beef jerky. After it comes to us, either fresh or frozen and thawed, if it's frozen, we run it through a slicer that we can't show you because it's proprietary.
After slicing, the meat goes into a tumbler, where it gets a flavor treatment.
The product soaks in a marinade for a couple of days. The marinades are made from things you might have in your kitchen: lemon juice, Worcester sauce, brown sugar. And each flavor has its own marinade. You want to know what's in the marinade? Look on the back of the bag. They'll tell you everything, except for the special seasonings, which of course is proprietary. We can't tell you.
The seasoned meat is then hung on sticks and placed on racks in preparation for the smokehouse. The smokehouse is a stainless steel room, about 10 feet by 20. Air passes through a fan located on top and is heated to about 200 degrees by a natural gas burner. From there, 2 ducts distribute the air evenly between both sides of the room. Then a liquid smoke fog is pumped into the smokehouse for 60 minutes to flavor the meat.
After the product leaves the smokehouse, it goes to our inspection station. Here, the product goes over inspection conveyors where our operators grab each piece and inspect it to make sure it's the right size. Pieces that are too big are cut smaller. After that, it goes through a metal detection to make sure there's no metal on the product before passing through a final inspection into the bin before it goes on to packaging.
Jerky is a portable energy-boosting snack enjoyed by hunters, campers, hikers, the military, and just about any non-vegetarian with strong teeth. And its long shelf life is ensured by its packaging.
The film we use to make these bags is specially constructed to keep moisture in and oxygen out. Additionally, we put in a little packet called an oxygen scavenger. That's designed to eat up any oxygen that's still left in the bag.
Then it's off to the warehouse and onto the trucks for distribution to hungry carnivores everywhere. It was with meat eaters in mind that Italian immigrant Constantino Oberto started his mom-and-pop sausage-making shop in 1918.
All animals have intestines. All pieces of meat have scrap, and so they figured that if I just grind it all up and put it in a casing, you got sausage.
Constantino's son, Art, arguably the company's biggest cheerleader, has been running Oberto for more than half a century.
Now there's a handsome fellow.
The company started making beef jerky in the early 60s.
When we first started making jerky, it was all hand operation. We'd get a beef round, trim it 100% lean, and freeze it and slice it on a butcher slicer. Then after the jerky was hung out and dried, then it was always in big long pieces. So we jerry-rigged up like a miter box with a paper cutter deal on it, and we'd just slide the jerky into the miter box and chop it off with just a good old paper cutter.
Under Art's direction, Oberto has streamlined the production process and grown to almost 1,000 employees. The most popular varieties of jerky are beef and turkey, but just about any meat can be flavored and dried. It takes 2 to 3 pounds of meat to make 1 pound of jerky, a great reduction in volume. But there's one snack that expands almost 50 times its original size when heated. And it tastes good covered in cheese or chocolate. Pork skin is a major ingredient in most commercially produced gelatin, which is widely used in the manufacture of other snack foods, like gummy bears, marshmallows, and some Jell-O desserts. More snack food tech will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to more snack food tech on Modern Marvels. Sweet, savory, spicy. What other food can be all things to all people?
It's a whole grain. You can't get any more whole grain than popcorn. It's high in fiber because it's very low in calories and there's virtually no fat in popcorn. The fat comes from the oil and the flavoring and the butter that you might put on it.
The American Popcorn Company of Iowa, makers of Jolly Time, the first brand name popcorn, has been around since 1914. Founder Cloyd H. Smith started the company from his home, where all the kernels were hand-shelled and processed. Today, Jolly Time uses the latest equipment in every stage of production. When a delivery truck carrying the kernels arrives from the farm, it pulls across a scale to be weighed. A sample from every load is taken to the lab for quality assessment. They'll be checking for optimum moisture content and popping yield.
Now we're going to see how well it performs, how well it pops. Currently, a concessionaire or a bulk customer is expecting it to be in the 45 range. 45 times this little kernel size. We put it in the tube to see how we're doing. This pops right out of 47.
But not all corn is popcorn, because not all corn can pop.
Popcorn is a unique plant. You plant a popcorn seed, you get a popcorn plant. 98% of the corn grown in the Midwest is field corn or dent corn. This is primarily animal feed. On the other end, you have sweet corn or corn on the cob, which we enjoy every summer.
The thing that's unique about popcorn is that it has a different type of pericarp
on the kernels, which someone discovered would actually pop and be something that humans could eat and enjoy.
The pericarp is the hard outer cellulose shell of a popcorn kernel. Inside is a small amount of moisture, stored in a circle of hard starch, called the endosperm. When heated to about 450 degrees Fahrenheit, the steam creates pressure. Once the building pressure becomes too great to contain, the pericarp bursts and turns the kernel inside out.
The original corn plant that goes back perhaps 20,000 years was found in caves in Mexico, so we know that the Aztec Indians grew and consumed popcorn. So popcorn has a very long history.
After a batch is approved, it goes through a multi-stage process that prepares the kernels for their ultimate fate.
These are grain bins, giant steel structures that we store our popcorn in. They each hold 900,000 pounds, and they're segregated by hybrid, by moisture, by grower, but more importantly, once they're in the bin, they establish their own little micro ecosystem, if you will. And so we monitor that constantly for that one key element. Again, it's the moisture content. That's what we really focus on.
Once the kernels reach optimum condition, they're dumped through a grate into the processing tower. A bucket elevator carries the seeds to the shaking sifter, which separates them by size. Next, the kernels are sent to the aspirator, where they stair-step through a giant vacuum cleaner. Then it's off to the gravity separator.
The deck or the bed is actually moving back at a certain rate of speed, which allows the grain to start naturally separating based on the weight and the size. There's also a defined amount of air that is blowing up through that, which again lofts the lighter kernels at a little bit higher plane than the heavier dense kernels. The bed is actually tilted, which where all of this gravity separation comes into play.
The final step takes the kernels through a color sorter to eliminate anything that is too dark, too light, or broken. The selected seeds go next door, where they'll be combined with flavors. A technician combines all the flavor ingredients that go into that little microwave bag.
This is where we combine all the soybean oil that comes out of that big tank next door with all the minor ingredients that go into each one of our different recipes. It's all done proportionately, and it's done very, very carefully.
Insulated stainless steel pipes carry the oil and flavor mixture to a packing area, where a 40-gram shot is pumped into each bag. The popcorn drops from above in measured amounts.
We're filling blaster butter today. That's on this production line. At about 120 bags a minute, we're putting in a recipe that will knock your socks off when it comes to flavor, but we can't tell you what that recipe is. We use air and pneumatics. It's all computerized. Once it's filled, it goes to a heat seal plate. The next station is where we code data. At each station, there are electronic eyes telling the next station what to expect.
The final part of this equation is the bag itself, specially designed to heat and expand in the microwave.
Well, there's some things I can't tell you. But I can tell you that it is a certain design paper that obviously doesn't allow the liquid oil to soak through. It has gussets and expansion chambers, so when it does heat up, that it does billow up and allow the steam to move and vent out of it properly. But probably one of the most key elements is what we call the heat patch or the susceptor patch. It's kind of contrary to your normal thinking that goes in a microwave because it's like anodized aluminum in a very, very micro thin sheet. And the heat goes to it, it concentrates the heat, and it actually allows the heat to go into the kernel. It excites the atoms inside of the kernel, and that's when they go banging back and forth, and that gets it up to a certain temperature and it explodes.
Popcorn just may be the perfect versatile snack. But it isn't the only one that pops. With nearly 520 million pounds consumed annually in the U.S., gum is a major industry.
Gum is becoming a very popular snack. In fact, right now it's the #1 snack in the United States.
That's quite a lot of responsibility for such a small package. A small package with a big history.
It goes back to the ancient Greeks. The Greeks would take mastic, that would come from the mastic shrub, and they would chew on that, and that would clean their teeth and also freshen their breath. You had the Mayans from Central America and Mexico that chewed on chicle. And then when the settlers came to North America, the Indians then really introduced them to what became the first commercially produced gum, and that was spruce gum.
In the 1860s, exiled former Mexican president and conqueror of the Alamo, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, sold 1 ton of chicle harvested from Mexican sapodilla trees to New York inventor Thomas Adams. After a year of failed experiments trying to make chicle carriage tires, a resigned Adams was ready to give up.
He happened to go into a drugstore, and as he was waiting for the druggist to come to him, a little girl came in and said, "Could I have a penny worth of gum?" And then when she left, he went to the druggist and he said, "What was that gum?" And he said, "It was paraffin gum." So he started looking at chicle to make that into a sellable type of product, like a chewing gum. And lo and behold, they did come up with a gum. It was called New York's #1 gum.
The first chicle-based gum was a hit. Other gum makers came out with their offerings, but none were flavored until William White came along in 1880.
He mixed flavor with corn syrup, and then by heating that with the chicle, he was able to incorporate flavor.
Adams, White, and a few other producers of gum formed the American Chicle Company, which created many of the most recognizable brands. Fresh on their heels was competing gum baron William J. Wrigley Jr. The gum that Adams and Wrigley produced contained natural ingredients and flavors. Today, a combination of natural and synthetic components make up the gum we chew.
Gum base could have 10 to 12 different ingredients. There is a different gum base if you're making a bubble gum, or if you're making a Trident, or if you're making a Dentine.
Colors, sweeteners, and softeners are added to the base. But with all of these components, flavoring is the one that determines the product's appeal.
What you're really selling to the consumer is flavor. You can use natural flavors that are extracts of fruits, or you can use artificial flavors that are man-made, for synthetic compounds. One flavor that goes into a product can have maybe 25 to 30 different components in it.
Once all the ingredients are combined, the gum mass is discharged through the extruder into a thin sheet. The sheet enters a series of rollers, which size the gum to the proper thickness and cut it into scored sections. Then it's off for further processing, packaging, and ultimately, chewing by just about everyone. And maybe someday, we'll be able to chew and swallow all our favorite snacks without the fat, carbs, calories, and sugar. But where's the fun in that?
In cakes, coffee, cars, and cereal, sugar always makes it better. When
crunchy, sugary, fizzy, pop. What do you hanker for? From handmade to high-tech, these treats feed our cravings. So grab a handful, take a bottle, drink it down, and pass some of that good stuff around. Now, more snack food tech on Modern Marvels. Each year, Americans consume a whopping 15 billion gallons of carbonated soft drinks. That's more than 50 gallons per person per year. While production processes can vary greatly with each soda manufacturer, all carbonated soft drinks begin life as a syrup. Today, we're making Dr. Pepper.
We have 4 components that you will put into a syrup. Typically, we'll have water, we'll have a sweetening system, we've got a coloring system, and then a flavoring system. Now, this is treated water.
Down and slowed down. After quality control is performed on the syrup, it's ready to enter the filling line. But first, gotta clean the bottles.
Today we're using our pre-labeled bottles, and we're going to send them through our inverted rinser. The purpose of the rinser is to rinse out any kind of contaminants or dust or anything that might be in the package.
The clean bottles are ready to be filled with the soft drink du jour. While syrup may be the most important part, the largest component in any soda is water. But not just any old tap water will do. The filtered and treated water is stored in tanks, ready for its holy matrimony with the syrup.
This is a large batch of syrup that we made earlier. From here, the syrup will travel through our line into our blender. From here, the syrup will be combined with our water from our RO water tanks, travels down through these systems here into our final mixing bowl. Here it is still uncarbonated. All we've done now is thrown the beverage in a 5-to-1 ratio. From here, the beverage will travel out into our carbonation pump and up and over to our carbo cooler.
This is where the industrial alchemy happens. The syrup and water blend enters the top of the carbo cooler and passes through a stainless steel screen pan. The droplets disperse down the carbon dioxide-filled tank over a series of refrigerated plates. As the liquid descends, it absorbs the CO2 gas. The combined cooled and carbonated beverage travels through an insulated line into the filler.
On top of the filler is a large tank. Beverage comes in through the bottom of the filler, fills up the tank. The tank then distributes product to each one of our filling valves located on the outside of the filler. The bottles will enter in. They will be grabbed by the neck supports on the filling valve. The neck support will bring the bottle up to the valve. Then from there, the bottle will exit out the other side full of product.
Full of effervescence, the bottles travel to the end of the line, where the flavor and bubbles are locked in.
To cap off everything we've talked about today, we're going to have to go to the capper. Once our finished beverage is in the bottle, it travels here to the capper. The cap is applied to the proper torque, and from there, it's shipped out to all the consumers all over the world.
Things may move slowly at a pilot plant, but the average full-scale bottling plant can output 600 to 1,000 20-ounce bottles per minute. Not too shabby considering the industry's humble beginnings.
And we want to make sure that the water is pure and clean so that all of our flavors and sweetness levels come through the way they're designed to by the scientists. We will then go ahead and add our sweetener system. Now, what Sharon's working with here is a high fructose corn syrup.
Sugar was the predominant sweetener used for almost a century. High fructose corn syrup took its place in most mass-produced soft drinks in the mid-1970s. HFCS is less expensive, which means more profits for manufacturers. And while consumers in blind taste tests can't distinguish soft drinks made with HFCS from those made with sugar, there are some who are happy to give their opinion.
Oh, gee. I mean, corn syrup makes sodas taste dull. and sugar gives sodas a real snap. Sugar versus corn syrup is always better.
The third ingredient is what gives Dr. Pepper its aesthetic identity, a coloring agent.
Now that we've got the color of the syrup just where we want it to be, we go ahead and add our special ingredients, and that's the flavoring. Now, I'd like to be able to tell you what's in there, but we can't because that's the top secret piece of our beverage.
The recipe from the small batch is scaled up in a large tank. And then a sample is brought back into the lab for final testing.
The tests we're performing here today are a measurement of tartness and a measurement of Brix, which is a measurement of sweetness. And we do these tests to ensure that the batch has been properly made.
This sweet success is ready for the big time.
Historically, when syrups were made, they were probably made in small batches of, say, maybe 1 gallon or 2 gallons. Today, our mixing operations blend ingredients through continuous blenders at a rate of 350 gallons a minute.
The syrup is the defining part of any soft drink. It's what gives the beverage its unique flavor.
When producing syrups, there are optimum conditions. For example, in our mixing process, we look for a low humidity type environment and a production mixed tank temperature of about 65 degrees.
New syrups are put to the test at a pilot plant, where the processes are scaled down.